At the end of Revelation 19, what does it say? It says that the remnant were slain with the sword. All the people. Christ comes back and kills everybody. It says, and the remnant were slain. Revelation 19, right here. And the remnant were slain with the sword. And what's taking place? Christ is coming back and he's defeating the people on the earth. Okay? He's defeating the people on the earth. All right? And the beast and the false prophet were taken. Now, I'm just giving you an example of it's okay to assume things and it's implied. Okay? When it's okay to do that in the scriptures. So the beast and the false prophet were taken and thrown into the lake of fire. And the remnant, the rest of the people, were slain with the sword. That's what it says. It says everybody's slain with the sword right there, right? Okay, so what do we have here is in Revelation 20 now, we're seeing that there's people that come back on the earth. There's people on the earth right here. Satan is loosed out of the prison and shall go out to deceive the nations. Well, where'd these nations come from? After the 1,000 years is over, he's going to go deceive the nations again. Right? And they go against God. And so, where'd they come from? Okay? Now, when we assume something, we should still use the Bible for that assumption. This is the key. When something's implied, you should be able to find that implication in the scripture somewhere. So, it would appear there's a contradiction here because it says the remnant were slain in verse 21 of Revelation 19, but then in the very next chapter we see nations coming against God after the 1,000 years is over. But what do we see here in Revelation chapter 6? Remember, chapter 6 is the cornerstone to understanding the rest of the Bible, really, almost. Pretty serious chapter. Well, in Revelation 6, it says, and the people said to the mountains and rocks, fall upon us and hide us from the face of him that sits upon the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. So some people, according to the scriptures, goes underground. It says it right here in Revelation chapter 6, verse 16. They said to the mountains, fall upon us and hide us from him. Then what does that mean? That implies, we can assume now that in Revelation chapter 19, verse 21, where it says the remnant were slain with the sword, the leftover, the people that were left were slain with the sword. We can assume that that's the people that what? Did not go hide underneath the rocks. And it's not even really an assumption, but it's an assumption with just chapter 19 and chapter 20. It's an assumption with chapter 19 and chapter 20 because we don't have, if you don't have chapter 6, you have to assume that that's what happened. So a lot of times in the Bible, when we assume something, it's because we may not have the other piece of scripture to confirm it. When you're reading the Bible, we assume a lot of things because we are getting a sort of an intuitive understanding because we're putting pieces together, and in our subconscious mind, things make sense or they don't make sense. It makes sense because even though I can't pinpoint where that scripture is, I built enough understanding on this idea that it makes sense, it sounds good, it seems to fit with my heart, my soul, it seems to resonate. But we want to be secure and we want to be founded stronger in the scriptures. So we need all the verses. I would prefer to have all the verses. I don't want to just assume that maybe I got this right. There has to be people that were underground. There has to be people that were underground, but then when I find this verse up here, that confirms my assumption. That confirms to me that no longer am I just it's not just implied. It's implied when you only have these two verses here, but it's no longer implied. It's no longer an assumption. We have concrete scriptural evidence.